Okay, folks, welcome to the video on Dharma. You've probably heard the term karma, and we're going to talk about that in the next video. And it's very deeply connected to the concept of Dharma. Just real quick, Dharma is kind of the organization and structure of the universe, and then karma is the moral law of cause and effect within that structure. But first, just a quick refresher on the three core concepts we talked about already. And I want to emphasize those really are they certainly are the three core concepts of Vedanta philosophy and of, we could argue, Hinduism more broadly. Remember, Vedanta and Hinduism are so closely related that I'm going to kind of make them interchangeable, even though the details get a little more complicated. But remember, everything really does go back to Brahman. Brahman is the alpha and omega, if you will, right? It is the origin of everything, what sustains everything, and what will be when everything's gone. It's always there. It's within us, and that part of it that's within us we call the Atman. And the problem is that there's this dust or this, corruption that it's not anybody's fault. I want to keep emphasizing that. This dust or corruption called the Maya that is just a side effect of God experiencing himself. And again, God conceived much more broadly than the Western concept of God. Right? So God is experiencing himself, but as he goes into apparent separation, there's this Maya, this cloud, this veil of illusion that makes us forget that we're all Brahman. It makes us forget that the Atman is within us. So anyways, I just wanted to lay down that background, those core concepts before going into the Dharma. So the Dharma, again, is... well, not again, I haven't told you this yet, but Dharma, it comes from the word dri in Sanskrit, which means to hold up or to sustain, right? So the Dharma is what allows the Brahman to unfold. It's the structure or core of the universe. So I gave the example of a spider web, like the emanation of a spider web from a spider is kind of like Brahman experiencing himself or becoming the universe that we know. And the Dharma would be like the things that hold that web together, right? So as the Brahman, which still is everything and all things, comes together, the Dharma is the sustaining part of the web that keeps it from falling apart, right? In the scientific sense, we can see it as the laws of nature. Right, we can see it. I remember that term prakriti from the readings, which is kind of like the base level of matter, of the laws of nature before it goes into the forms. Right? It's kind of like we think of atoms in terms of the scientific worldview. That is the part of the Dharma that helps sustain the Brahman as it's unfolding. And so it's an order that is a scientific one, right? It literally includes like I just said, the actual scientific grounding to all things from the Big Bang forward and the evolutionary principles that led to the different forms of life. But it's also moral. And that's where the karma is going to come in, and I'll talk about in the next video. It's moral in the sense that because we're these beings that have come and emanated from God, from Brahman, we have a duty to help sustain the universe, right? We have a duty to help sustain it. And the concept of a duty, you can see in terms of, in Western philosophy, we call it deontology. If you ever take an ethics class, you'll talk about that. Immanuel Kant is famous for saying, we have a duty towards other beings, and it's an all-encompassing universal duty. You have a duty to treat others as you want to be treated, right? Which, of course, is in many other religions, including Christianity. But this duty, in terms of Dharma, it means we have a duty to help God sustain the universe, given that we are part of God. Now, in the history of Hinduism, from our modern ears, some of this can sound a little not as morally advanced because some of these ideas were developing during the times the caste system was very strong. And I'm sure even before this class, some of you have heard of the caste system in India. And if you read the first couple of chapters, you know that the caste system is discussed. And people are just sort of said to be, hey, that's the caste you're in. Don't question it. Don't try to advance yourself. So in some of the early parts of Hindu philosophy and Hindu religion, there was this idea that the Dharma, part of the Dharma was knowing your place in the caste system, right? If you're a woman, you shouldn't try to do the job of a man, and you should accept your inferior role. So some of this can seem a little primitive morally from our perspective today. But first of all, it's evolved a lot. And Buddha, for example, 2,000 years ago, the Buddha, who, as I keep saying, we'll talk about later, the Buddha grew out of the Hindu tradition, and he specifically challenged the caste system. He said, guys, this isn't literally, guys, this isn't what, this isn't really in line with the morality that I think the higher level of reality is pushing us towards. I have a friend who's Indian, and he's Indian American, but he has lived in India and he has deep roots to the culture. And he tells me that even though the caste system was eliminated in India, it still persists culturally, right? People still, they know they were born into a certain caste, and they not everyone, of course, but some people tend to see themselves as better or worse or in a different position based on the caste they were born into. So, it's hard to erase something that's been that deeply ingrained in the culture. But okay, let's continue with the morality part. So the morality part of Dharma is that, think about the idea of a self-made person, a person that sometimes we say pulls themselves up by their bootstraps. In Hinduism, it's not that that's completely absent, but in Hinduism, the idea of Dharma is that, yes, there is some part of our lives that has to do with free choice and free will. On the other hand, we have to appreciate that we are part of this sustaining web of the universe called Dharma. So, for example, just look around you. I'm looking now at the camera I'm speaking into. I'm looking at the microphone, at my clothes and my hat. I didn't make these things of my own volition. Right? I'm part of a web of human labor that at different levels leads to the production of so many things and materialistic possessions I have. Just like any of us here can look around look at our phones. You can't create a phone on your own. And nor can any one person create a phone. Right? It has to go through assembly lines, and different parts have to be mined from different parts of the world and brought to a factory. Those have to be put together, and then there's different levels in that factory that build this part and they build that part, and there's AI machines that are building certain parts of it now that are determining certain aspects of it. It's all a big interconnected web. I think back to when I worked construction for about 3 years when I was paying my way through college, and this was Northern California, so it rained and snowed a lot more up there, and it was close to the mountains. So I was part of a gutter roofing company, gutter in particular, but we mainly did like rain gutters to protect people's houses from rain, and it was a big industry up there because it's more in demand. Down here, not as much; it doesn't rain as much. But anyways, even in that small company, which was a small company of about 10, 15 people, roughly speaking, there's, of course, the boss who's getting jobs and determining what jobs we're going to do. Are we going to repair this person's house? We have time to build this, to put the gutter and roofing on this new construction house. And so he's determining jobs. That's part of the Dharma, right? Like looking at this from the Hindu perspective of life. And then there's the guy in the garage of the company that built the downspouts. And then there's a wholesaler that we got a big roll of gutter that was in the form of sheet metal. So it looks like a big roll of tape, but it's metal that's really sharp and dangerous and about that wide. And that we would put into a machine that bent it into the shape of gutter, which we would then cut and fit to the houses. And I was the end result guy. One of the people who went to the houses and put on the gutter onto the house and the downspouts after it had gone through that process. So anyways, any of you who are working and have jobs, I'm sure you can think of a similar thing where there's this assembly of all these different aspects of the web that produces a product or produces the result of your work. And that's really the Dharma. The Dharma is trying to get us to see that we're all part of this web of creation that's sustained. Fundamentally, it goes back to Brahman, right? Because everything goes back to Brahman in Hinduism. But the Dharma is a more specific way of saying the sustaining aspect of the universe that includes both what we would call scientific, but also a moral sustenance. And so what happens here is, like I said, a duty grows out of this, that because we're God, because we're Brahman, we have a duty to help sustain it, to help hold it up, to be to do our part, if you will, in the universe. And if you look in the book, you'll see that there's a distinction made between conscious and non-conscious beings. So, which is just as obvious as it sounds. Basically, from the Hindu perspective, only humans are conscious beings. We're the only ones with true self-awareness. And so, because of that, we have a greater duty. Because our own self-awareness can muddy up the whole picture, right? Because again, we can get caught in the Maya, and we can forget, in a way that a spider or ant doesn't forget. They just live and do their part, and they sustain just by nature, just by their own nature. They help sustain the web of Dharma. But for us, because of our consciousness, we can forget our true nature, right? And again, that's the whole point of Hinduism, is to remember our true nature as Brahman. But we can forget our true nature, and so therefore we have a greater duty from the perspective of the Vedanta philosophy to help sustain it. So how do we do that? Well, you might think that we do that by doing good deeds and becoming Mother Teresa or the Dalai Lama, who's a great Buddhist leader, where we devote all of our attention to helping others. That's one way you could do it, but that's not really what Hindus mean when they say it. When they say everybody does their part, they mean everybody figures out what they're good at and how they can help, and they focus in on that thing, and they get good at that, and they find their part of the universe. They sustain their part of the universe. So think of vocations. This could be a teacher becoming a teacher because she knows that's what she wants to do. It could be a plumber becoming a plumber for that same reason. It could be a YouTube creator who has discovered that she's really good at fixing things around the house. And so she puts out a video that really helps a lot of people and grows a channel, and then that becomes her thing, is that she becomes very passionate at creating videos and becomes a content creator. Everybody has their thing that helps them fit into their part of the universe. So one of our moral duties, of course, many Hindus would say, we'll talk about karma later, you should help other people and see yourself in terms of how you can help rather than what you can get egoistically from the universe. But one of the ways to do that could simply be to find what you're good at and to hone in on that occupation. And so, anyways, that's where that's where I'm going to leave it. And next week we'll talk about how karma fits into this picture of the web of Dharma that we're all a part of, that all came forth from Brahman, which, remember, Brahman is still everything.